Anyway, welcome back to another Pickled Dragon Unscripted. Matt, Pickled Dragon, enjoying my Scarabus, a new single malt Scotch whiskey. It's not too bad. Not too bad.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And with me, we have the currently non-alcoholic Dracoya.
I'm going to Adepticon tomorrow, so I gotta like play it smart today because I know that this whole weekend is just gonna be nothing but shaking hands and drinking beers. So gotta take it easy.
Drinking beers and hopefully ample amounts of whiskey.
Yeah.
So,
And painting. Lots and lots of painting.
yes, yes.
So,
My current obsession is BattleTech, so I'm painting all my mechs. That's good times.
ooh, cool.
It's my Atlas. He's going to die a terrible death when the game rolls out, I'm sure. So, all right. So we've got a new story for you guys to go.
There we go. There he
Ooh,
is. He's a
there-
little guy. It's hard to focus on him right now for some reason.
focus.
Eh.
Well, yeah. He's pretty cool.
Anyway.
He looks like he's asking for a handout or a handshake.
Well, so he's kind of a cool figure, and I got it as a commission from one of our viewers. And our viewer said that he wanted me to put lightning scars all down his arms and his head, and he's like, but I don't know if this is possible because he's pretty teeny.
Getting a
But
lot
I'm
of detail
like,
on a 28 millimeter miniature.
but of course, me being me, Matt, I did. I was like, okay, bet. Challenge accepted. So I
Boom.
can't wait for our viewer to see him. I hope he likes it.
I hope he does too.
Hmm.
Guys, but in all honesty and in all reality, we must take a moment and say DnDDice.com sells some very wonderful dice. And if you would like to support the channel, you can use promo code Pickled when you buy said wonderful dice. So please go visit.
DnDdice.com. Use promo code PICKLED.
Yes, support us in all of our endeavors and inebriated state.
Mhm.
Okay, so interesting article from Business Insider of all places. I thought this was interesting. Dracoya, you found it. So
It
let
doesn't
me
matter. But yeah, I thought it was interesting because it's Business Insider.
yeah, and Business
Oh.
Insider just figured out that D&D is popular just as WotC is collapsing on its face. But better late than never. Because honestly, I think that we're at the point, well, I've been at this point for years now, where if I say, hey, let's play D&D, it doesn't necessarily mean Dungeons and Dragons. It's like, would you like a Coke? And I get you a Pepsi. Well, I got you a Coke. Like it's a generic term for
Tabletop.
tabletop fantasy RPGs, right?
Yeah.
So I'm willing to give it that. But I think that there has been some news as of late, in the last couple of years, where they talked about this loneliness epidemic in the country.
Mm.
And really, it started with the pandemic. I think people stopped mingling as much and started collapsing in their worlds. But I
They
don't
still
know
say
how
that.
true. I don't know how true if it's a true epidemic. What would you think?
Well, they still say that a lot of people are suffering from this. And they're also saying that Gen Z is not getting married. Like Gen Z people are not getting married. They're not having kids. Millennials are not having kids, but a lot of them are getting married, but no one's having kids. And I think that especially Gen Z is guilty of this. They've taken their priorities away from finding romantic partners, which then has created what people would say a loneliness epidemic. Because even if that's not your priority, I do think that there are a lot of people who want that in their lives. And I think that society gives us a lot of pressure to where being single just means you're lonely. And and so I think that's part of it.
It kind of assumes that no one has friends, like like if you're not dating, you're all alone. Like, I don't know if that's true or not.
All by myself.
Um, so yeah, so this article, there's some things I got to say about it. But they go through and they talk about a few folks. They give like some anecdotal responses. This fella has been working at a game cafe, yada yada. And they kind of give a few stories, but you know there's a few quotes in here I find interesting. So, once considered a niche game for fantasy nerds to play in someone's basement, tabletop role-playing games have entered the mainstream. Well, that was like what, 2016? Like it kind of like blew up. Yeah. So, I mean, they're only like 9 years late, but
To
I
be fair,
I
this isn't like their niche, you know?
yeah, but I like what I want to do is as we step through this, I started as I read this article, I started thinking about when I was a kid, and we played more than just fantasy role play games. And maybe it's splitting hairs. Like maybe they're really talking about RPGs in general, but fantasy nerds, like for us, it was a bunch of people came together who didn't really, they weren't really jocks and they didn't really fit anywhere else. My group had like band geeks and art people, like artists in it, and
The
uh,
Misfits.
yeah, the people that didn't really fit in anywhere else and weren't necessarily into sports. But that said, we did have two football players in our original group, so.
Wow, that's saying something.
Yeah, I mean, like, and we even had girls. Like, I've always had girls in my groups from the very
You
beginning,
had
always had
girls.
girls in my group. So, like when people talk about how it's like girls are a unicorn, like for me, like my experiences, I didn't feel that. Yes, there was like one or two girls to, five guys.
I would say that's a good ratio. That's an accurate ratio, is one girl to every five guys that play. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that, like, that's still a pretty good ratio, I think.
Yeah. So, I don't know. They go on and talk about Gary Gygax making the game in his basement and now it's exploded on the scene. Well, exploded on the scene and then collapsed in 2025. But anyway, nerds are taking over and they may have a solution to America's loneliness crisis. It's a way, and that is really what we talked about, you know, when they first announced the VTT. I was kind of like, I said all along, you go back to our older videos, I just don't know how well it's going to do because, the only way it's going to really take off is one, you convince people to uh, leave their current VTT, which with all the assets and books and everything else, they're probably fairly entrenched. It would be expensive for them to move. And two, the way the VTT was presented, it really felt like they were going to be competing or trying to attract video game players. And I just didn't think they were going to compete against an MMO with slick graphics and,
No,
years of content and so forth
no.
for a game that requires a DM. I know there's been a lot of talk about, there's been a lot of talk about, AI
AI.
DMs and everything, but they weren't there. So it's
Well,
not
it's
even,
still not there. I mean, an AI is a really great tool. I actually have my computer whenever I DM, just in case something crazy happens, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't know what to name this. Give me some names, and it's a really good co-pilot, but it is in no way a freaking pilot.
yeah, I mean, yeah. So when they talk about America's loneliness crisis, what they're talking about is human interaction. And so that's how I got on the VTT is like what's missing from the VTT is yes, you are playing with other players, but I don't think there is a substitute for actually interacting with people, having them there,
Interesting.
sharing a meal together, laughing, and
Yeah.
being white knuckled in serious situations together. Um, I just don't think there's a substitute for that.
Yeah.
So. RPGs in general. Maybe we should be talking about, does Shadow Dark or Castles and Crusades have the answer? Which is why I say D&D is a generic term, right? Um, so yeah, and here again we have more uh anecdotal examples here. I didn't realize how close to burnout I actually was. And she found the game and the community. She found the community enchantingly warm and wildly creative.
I would say that's mostly true. Yeah. I
Yeah.
I mean, as a painter myself, and I would say only half of my people are D&D people and the other half are just painters, but I think that both communities have been really wonderful and open. And every single time that I, as a woman, have faced adversity because of some lovely human being, I tend to have five different other knights in shining armor jump down their throat. And for that, it just made me feel so safe. And definitely our viewers are really good about that. So you know who you are. You've commented and you have come to my defense in more than one occasion. I appreciate you.
And it's funny because for all of the, gnashing of teeth and consternation we keep hearing from the activist crowd about people behaving badly, essentially. I mean, man, it's just so rare that I see a problem crop up in a game. In 45 years of DMing thousands of games, I've been to so many cons and whatnot. The only people I've ever really had a problem with are the people who are trying to right these wrongs that they say are rampant in our community. And so, yeah, when I see someone say, "Hey, I'm new and I find these group of people warm and creative," I'd say, "Yeah, that's about right." You know, that's about right. So yeah, let's shoot down here to a couple quotes here. Um, I was like,
This one was
"Oh,
so good.
go ahead."
I was like, oh, I know what a mind flare is. I have this exotic information that you all don't. Let me teach you. I'm the cool guy.
Yeah, like because he
I
saw
thought that
Stranger Things. He saw
I thought
Stranger
that
Things.
was so funny because I think I was on a date last week and this guy didn't know something about D&D and I was like, yeah, well, you're just not as cool as me.
Yeah, like, and the other quote there, people would think it was strange that a group of women performing artists wanted to play D&D, and that's just not the case anymore. And honestly, I just don't think it was like, obviously there are groups that would have considered a woman at the table a unicorn, but my
Yeah.
experience again was just not that. So, um, and we have a topic coming up from a 1978 Dragon magazine where they were writing about women in gaming.
Yeah.
And they had tons of women write in and gave their experiences. So obviously there's always been women around. And I'm sure that there's gonna be plenty of folks out there be like, back in 1980, there was like one woman for every 8,000 guys. And it's like, you know, I wish there was some like actual data to back that up.
Well, you
But
remember Secrets of Blackmore? There were female players in Secrets of Blackmore.
yeah, yeah. Yes, Gail. Gail
Yeah.
was the very first lady to ever play.
Like exactly the original, like even before D&D, there were still women showing up. It's just, yeah,
Yes.
it's not as a big thing, but you could also argue that in the gaming community in general, you know?
Yeah, it's one of those things where we all have different experiences and we have to have our mind, keep our minds open to listen to other people's you know, experience,
Perspective.
yeah, perspective and experiences. So yeah, it's all good. Um, so this is kind of funny to me. Pascal has noticed a big shift in the culture from when he was playing. In the 80s, being called a nerd was a massive, massive insult. and you avoided it at all costs, and you felt insulted. You felt almost ashamed. He says, "We're all nerds now. It's all one big group. I don't care if you don't have social skills. Come play with us." And that's honestly what it's always been about. Like I said at the beginning, it was always a thing where we just took everyone's misfit toy and included them in the group. And I think it's funny where they're trying to like say that, oh, we do that now and that makes us special. Well, it was like that's always how it was, you know? Like and as far as being called a nerd, uh I think there are a lot worse things that could happen than just being called a nerd for, you know.
That's true. Actually, it's funny that they mention lack of social skills because whenever I meet new players who are very anxious about their lack of social skills or their ability to play, I always encourage those types of players to play Bard because it puts them in such a different situation that they themselves in the real world would never pursue. It's terrifying. What do you mean I'm the one that has to negotiate and actually be the center of attention and go to a party? Oh God, no. But because it's D&D, there's no consequences to this, you know? Worst case scenario, you move on. Like it's not a big deal. And I think that is really freeing for people trying to grow and learn new things.
Yeah, there are all kinds of perspectives and ways people have dealing with the game. I can remember introducing the game to some people, and a few of the experienced players wanted them just to play something simple like a fighter. And I'm like, well, what do you want to be able to do? And they explained what they wanted to do, and invariably it's casting spells because that's kind of like the
Of
thing, right?
course. It's so
Um,
cool.
and yeah, and so then at that point, the experienced players were like, well, let's just make them first level so they don't have to worry, they don't have to get overwhelmed with too much information. And I'm like, first level, well, you guys are all like fifth level. I don't think it's gonna be a whole lot of fun for them. And
Yeah, no, at least give him third.
yeah, I mean, I was just there's like all these different philosophies when it comes to this sort of thing, but. There's another quote from the article that I found interesting. Um, and it's talking about John Edwards, a 60-year-old who was into role-playing games for a long time, but now he's shifted to more traditional board games over the years. And they talk about how time consuming it was to run D&D campaigns. And I
Mm.
know that I know a lot of older players who have moved on to board games like Scythe and these more, intensive board games. But we also have to remember there's been a revolution in board games too. So it's not like they went from D&D to Monopoly, like
Yeah.
they there's things going on outside of role playing games, and so the players who prefer certain styles of play are landing in different places. And yeah, but I also think it's funny because we talk about this so often. Um, he says he still values how games opened up his social circles, particularly in a country that is very polarized politically right now. It means you can sit across a table from people that you otherwise maybe wouldn't be comfortable sitting with. And that is a profound statement because there is a certain section of the population out there who will refuse to even sit with, person on the other side of the aisle. You know, a friend of mine recently told me that a player showed up to a game that they were starting. It was a Curse of Strahd game, and the first thing she did before she sat down was like, "If there's any people who support this politician here, say it now because I'm going to leave." It's like it's one of those things where if nobody would say anything about politics, they could probably get along really well. And And I think it also shows like the way that games can bring us together, you know.
Well,
So
you know, they have records of people playing D&D in prisons and how it really crossed the barrier of the different gangs because they would have different people from different gangs all just want to play because it wasn't about what gang you were affiliated with. It was about let's just sit down and play. And that's created a really wonderful bridge between a lot of different groups of people who otherwise would not have interacted.
yeah, and this article seems to be hitting a lot of topics that I've thought about over the years. And this next quote is one that you had spotted,
I
Tricole.
love this one. A lot of times we grow out of play and out of imagination, she tells me. It's considered something that's for children. See, and that does kill me because one thing that I have noticed as I grow up and get older every year is that people stop having imaginations. They stop seeing the world in color. And I don't know, there's just something so magical about being a child because everything is new and interesting and exciting and it's a world of possibility. And I think that's what I love about Dungeons and Dragons is it's just this beautiful, luxurious world of possibility. And people stop seeing the world that way, you know? We get in our heads and we get anxious and we're like, "Oh, we can't do that. We can't do this. I'm not good at that. I'm not good at this. So what if this bad thing happens?" And kids don't have that because they're not equipped with this anxiety that we as adults have. And I feel like I've done a pretty damn good job at keeping that part of me alive, but so many people haven't, and it makes me so sad.
And I oftentimes think about it as a generational thing. Like, I when I think about my dad and my grandfather, and when I would ask them about their youth and the things they enjoyed doing, almost invariably, um, they don't do those things anymore. They
No.
have different hobbies as adults, things that are more acceptable for an adult to do. There's that old saying, when you grow up, you put the toys away, right? Um,
Yeah.
but there's also another quote that I really like, and I don't know who said this, but if you can think of it, let us know. But it's when something like, we don't stop playing games when we grow old. We grow old when we stop playing games. And that's kind of my philosophy, you know. Uh, but
So sad.
I guess with that, that's really, the business insiders catching up a little bit here. But we thought this article was kind of interesting. What do you guys think about all this? Do you think that there's a isolation and loneliness epidemic in the country?
Do you
And
think that people stop being children and stop having imagination as they get older?
yeah, and our game's gonna like bring this country together finally.
That would be great.
Yeah, I like that. But till next time,
Like, subscribe, share our videos, and as
be
always, guys, come back and have another round on us.
woo.